Hey guys, once again, I'm a little busy today, so instead of doing a full response, I wanted to get philosophical a bit and talk about intolerance and tolerance. So recently, a small thing happened in my life that made me think about this a little bit, and that's regarding tolerance. And of course, I've never thought about this in this angle before, which is why it's still on my mind to this day. So I have a few friends who are in the LGBTQ plus community. Some I'm closer with and some I'm not. And as you probably know from my previous videos, I'm a huge ally. So if you have a problem with LGBTQ people, then you have a problem with me. I stand very firmly on my stance. LGBTQ rights are human rights. Anyway, the other day I had a small interaction with a friend of a friend. We'll call him Person A. Basically, a few of my friends are friends with this Person A because they went to the same high school together or something. And Person A is openly bigoted. He is heavily religious and has publicly discriminated against gay people. So knowing this, of course, I didn't have a great opinion of him, so I didn't go out of my way to talk to him. Until that one day when my friends and I were on Discord playing an online game, and he joined the call and started making comments about our game. Now, he didn't say anything bad necessarily, but me being a person who hates bigots, I was disrespectful towards him. One of my closest friends is gay, so it's almost as if Person A's existence was a threat to my friend. I won't go into details, of course, but if you're a third-party observer who doesn't know either of us, it may seem like I was being rude for absolutely no reason. Anyway, after this conversation ended, one of my other friends asked me why I behaved the way I did, and I just told him I have no tolerance for bigots. To which he replied, yes, but if you're rude to these types of people, then they will never change their ways. Basically saying that I should still treat them normally, and that's how eventually, somewhere down the line, that person could be convinced to change their ways, I guess. Especially after they get to know the people in the LGBT community. At the time, I thought it was a stupid idea, but then this got me thinking a lot about the whole thing and how I should be behaving. Is it acceptable for me to be rude to someone who has discriminatory ideologies, even if the conversation topic is something completely irrelevant? And by extension, was it okay for me to judge Person A's entire character based off his one belief? For all I know, he could be a very generous person who has done lots of good things in his life, but I judged him based off the one fact I knew about him. Another question, is it better overall for the LGBTQ community if allies were tolerant or intolerant towards bigots? And of course, I'm sure many of you would have differing opinions. This is actually a common philosophical thought called the paradox of tolerance, which aims to answer the question, should we be tolerant towards the intolerant? Now, the paradox of tolerance suggests that if a society is infinitely tolerant, or if that there is a standard to uphold tolerance of everyone and every ideology, then eventually the intolerant will dominate. From a logical standpoint, that makes some sense because there's no intolerance against that intolerance, nothing opposes them. But of course, that doesn't necessarily consider the idea that my friend suggested regarding being able to change people's minds by not actively being rude to them. In some ways, the way many people change out of their solid beliefs come from this. In fact, most of the stories I personally hear when people transition from Christianity to atheism often includes a long process of being exposed to the other side's arguments instead of being constantly berated, for example. So what is the right answer here? As for me, at first I really didn't know. I'm not a philosopher, nor do I really engage in philosophical thought beyond science, so I may not be the best person to answer this question. But after thinking about it, my conclusion actually remained relatively the same. No, I will not be tolerant towards the intolerant, but I do think the degree in which this is applied needs to have a line somewhere, and I'm here to convince you why. First of all, my logic is people like Person A are the first offenders. The LGBTQ plus community are just trying to mind their own business, and all you had to do was leave them alone. So you are actively going out of your way to make other people's lives miserable, and that, I think, does not deserve my tolerance. But what about changing their minds, I hear you ask? While I do agree that being patient with someone is potentially better at eventually changing their minds, I think as a whole, the odds are much too low for me to ignore the other consequences that come with that. Something like discriminatory ideologies is often deeply tied with something, such as religion, which is something that people have deep connections with, and therefore changing their minds about those particular topics can be very difficult. How many people have I debated on this channel and in real life where they then went on to change their minds? As much as we'd like for it to be often, it really isn't. People are stubborn, people don't like to change the way they view things, and they certainly don't like to change their core ideologies. And the act of being tolerant, at least in my opinion, would have other negative effects in this aspect. So for example, if I were tolerant towards every bigot I meet, let's say 1 out of 10 I was able to eventually convert, that still leaves 9 people who thinks their behavior is okay. If we let all the bigots run free without opposition, no one is going to actively question their position. Outsiders who haven't solidified a proper viewpoint on this would mostly see these bigoted opinions and therefore have a higher chance of becoming bigots themselves. So therefore, I think it's critical to make it clear that these ideologies are not welcomed and needs to be opposed. That being said, was it okay for me to behave the way that I did, being rude to Person A when the topic wasn't even on homosexuality? Well, I don't know. Like I said, they could be a good person in every other aspect, but what I do know is that bigoted people tend to have other horrible ideologies too. People who are against homosexuality are often also racist or sexist. They're more likely to have less sympathy towards other people and would vote for things such as erasing the minimum wage or voting to restrict abortion access. Not saying that this is a one-to-one correlation, but it seems to at least be a trend of some sort. So maybe you could say that I was wrong for judging this person's entire character based off one fact I knew about him, but to that I counter that just from this one fact, I can probably make some sort of prediction on what he's like, his other ideologies, and what he would do if he had his way. But of course, without getting to know him better, I wouldn't know for sure. So maybe my behavior wasn't justified, at least not fully. That being said, back to the intolerance against intolerance question, I do think there needs to be some sort of limit, specifically regarding the intensity of intolerance you should display. For example, I don't think people should do anything that goes against any human rights. Intolerant people are still people after all, and they still deserve things such as freedom of speech, for example, which is why I'm not a huge fan of cancel culture. But if I find you being intolerant towards a group of people, expect me to at least flame the shit out of you. Anyway, that's my quick 2 cents regarding this topic. Do you agree, disagree? Let me know in the comment section below, especially from those of you who have thought about this longer than I have. I think there's still a lot I haven't talked about yet regarding this topic, such as where do you draw the line at determining if someone is being intolerant or tolerant? Whose sense of justice should we apply? These require a lot of thought, and I don't want to get too deep about it now.